Writing. The old train station smelled of rain, rust, and forgotten promises. Emily stood beneath the flickering light with her coat wrapped tightly around her thin shoulders, clutching a faded leather suitcase that no longer closed properly. Water dripped from the edge of the roof in uneven rhythms, splashing onto the cracked cement near her boots. Around her, strangers hurried through the storm without looking at one another. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere, except her. The last message from her father echoed in her mind like a wound that never healed. "Don't come back." 3 words sent 8 years ago. 8 years of silence. Yet here she was, standing in the town she once escaped from, because grief had a strange way of dragging people home. Her father was dead. The funeral had already happened 2 days earlier. She hadn't attended. She couldn't. By the time the letter reached her tiny apartment in Chicago, he was already buried beside her mother beneath the old oak trees outside St. Mary's Church. The rain intensified as she stepped outside the station. The town looked smaller now, exhausted somehow. The bakery where her mother used to buy cinnamon bread was boarded shut. The movie theater had become a pawn shop. Even the air felt older. A taxi driver lowered his window. "You need a ride?" Emily hesitated before nodding. "To Willow Creek Road." The old man glanced at her through the mirror while driving. "Haven't seen you around." "I grew up here." "What family?" She swallowed carefully. "Harrison." The driver's expression shifted instantly. "Oh." That single word carried recognition, discomfort, and pity. The rest of the drive happened in silence. When the house finally appeared through the rain, Emily's chest tightened painfully. The white paint had peeled away years ago. The porch leaned slightly to one side. One upstairs window was shattered and covered with wood, yet memories flooded every corner. Her mother laughing while watering flowers. Her father fixing bicycles in the garage. Summer nights chasing fireflies. And the screaming. Always the screaming near the end. She paid the driver and stood motionless before the gate. For a moment, she considered leaving. Then the front door opened. A little girl stood there. She couldn't have been older than 7. Dark curls framed her tiny face, and her large brown eyes stared at Emily with cautious curiosity. "You're late," the girl said softly. Emily frowned. "Excuse me." The child opened the door wider. "Aunt Claire said you might not come." Aunt Claire. Emily's heart stumbled. Claire Harrison had been her father's younger sister. Sharp-tongued, stubborn, impossible to impress. Emily stepped inside slowly. The house smelled different now. Medicine, dust, old wood, and something else. Loneliness. Claire appeared from the kitchen carrying a cup of tea. Her silver hair was tied loosely behind her neck. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Claire sighed. "You look like your mother." Emily felt tears threaten immediately. "That's not fair." Claire's eyes softened. "No," she whispered. "It isn't." The little girl quietly disappeared upstairs while Claire motioned toward the kitchen table. Emily sat carefully. "You didn't come to the funeral," Claire said. "I know. He waited for you." Emily's jaw tightened. "He told me never to return." Claire stared at her for a long moment before shaking her head slowly. He regretted that every single day. The anger Emily had carried for years suddenly rose like fire inside her chest. "He threw me out after Mom died. I was 19. I had nowhere to go. He was drowning. And I wasn't." Claire closed her eyes briefly. "Your father became someone else after your mother passed." Emily laughed bitterly. "You mean cruel." "He became broken." Silence spread between them. Rain tapped against the windows. Finally, Emily looked upstairs. "Who's the little girl?" Claire hesitated. "Her name is Sophie." "And?" "She's your sister." The world stopped. Emily stared blankly, certain she had misunderstood. "My what?" Claire's hands trembled slightly around the teacup. "Your father had another child." Emily stood so abruptly the chair scraped violently against the floor. "No. He never told you because he was ashamed." "Ashamed?" Emily's voice cracked. "He replaced Mom? It wasn't like that. Then explain it to me." Claire inhaled shakily. 3 years after you left, your father met a woman named Lena. She was kind to him, helped him survive. Sophie was born a year later." Emily felt physically sick. "Where is the mother?" "She died last winter." The room became unbearably quiet. Emily looked toward the staircase again. A little girl, alone, just like she once was. "I can't do this," Emily whispered. Claire reached into her pocket and placed a small key on the table. "Your father left something for you in the attic." Emily didn't respond. She climbed the narrow attic stairs slowly, each step creaking beneath her weight. Dust floated through thin streams of evening light. Old boxes surrounded the room like sleeping ghosts. At the center sat a wooden chest. Her hands shook as she unlocked it. Inside were hundreds of letters, all addressed to her. Emily sat frozen. The first envelope was dated 7 years earlier. She opened it carefully. "Emily, I know you hate me. You have every right to. I keep trying to write this without sounding like I deserve forgiveness. I don't. But there hasn't been a single morning where I haven't regretted losing you." Tears blurred the ink instantly. She opened another. "I saw a girl today who laughed exactly like your mother. I had to pull the truck over because I couldn't breathe." Another. "Your birthday passed yesterday. I bought a chocolate cake and couldn't eat it. Claire yelled at me for an hour afterward." Another. "Sophie asked why she doesn't have a big sister around. I told her you were brave enough to leave this town before it destroyed you." Emily broke completely. She cried harder than she had in years, bent over the letters while grief ripped through her body in violent waves. Every word carried the weight of a man who had wanted redemption, but never found the courage to seek it properly. At the bottom of the chest rested a final envelope. "If you ever come home, please don't punish Sophie for my mistakes. She deserves better than the life I gave you. I loved you, Emily, even when I failed you, especially then." She didn't realize someone had entered the attic until a tiny hand touched her arm gently. Sophie stood beside her silently. "You're crying." Emily wiped her face quickly. "I'm okay. That's what grown-ups say when they're not okay." The child sat beside her. For several moments, they simply stared at the rain through the attic window. Then Sophie spoke quietly. "Daddy cried too." Emily's throat tightened painfully. "When?" "At night, mostly. He thought I was asleep." The little girl looked down at her hands. "He talked about you all the time." Emily felt another crack inside her heart. "What did he say?" Sophie smiled faintly. "That you used to dance in the kitchen while making pancakes." A broken laugh escaped Emily unexpectedly. "I did." "He said you were stubborn." "That too. And brave." Emily turned away immediately because tears were returning again. Sophie leaned closer carefully. "Are you leaving again?" The question landed like a knife. Emily looked at the child properly for the first time. Same dark eyes as their father. Same nervous habit of twisting fingers together when anxious. A sister. Her sister. "I don't know," Emily admitted honestly. Sophie nodded slowly, pretending the answer didn't hurt. But children could never hide sadness well. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The house groaned softly in the darkness, while old memories crawled through every corner of her mind. She remembered her father teaching her to ride a bicycle. She remembered him carrying her after nightmares. She remembered the terrible months after her mother's death when silence replaced love and grief poisoned everything. People didn't become monsters overnight. Sometimes they just became lost. Around midnight, she walked downstairs for water and found Claire sitting alone at the kitchen table. "She still waits by the window every evening," Claire said quietly without looking up. Emily frowned. For what? For someone who stays. The words lingered heavily. Claire finally looked at her. "I'm getting old, Emily. I can't raise Sophie much longer." Emily crossed her arms defensively. "You think I can? I think you understand loneliness better than anyone." The next morning, Sophie asked if Emily wanted to see the lake. They walked together beneath cloudy skies while cold wind moved through the trees. Sophie talked endlessly about school, books, frogs she collected near the creek, and how she hated peas. Emily found herself smiling despite
everything. At the lake, Sophie sat on the dock swinging her legs above the water. "Daddy used to bring me here when he got sad." Emily sat beside her quietly. "He told me sadness is like water," Sophie continued. "If you keep fighting it, you drown faster." Emily stared across the gray surface. "Your dad said that?" Sophie nodded proudly. For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to remember her father before grief destroyed him, not the angry man who pushed her away, but the loving one who once carried her on his shoulders through autumn festivals. Human beings were complicated that way, love and damage living inside the same heart. Days passed, then a week. Emily kept telling herself she would leave soon. Yet every morning Sophie waited for her with excited eyes. Every evening they cooked together. Slowly the house felt less haunted. One afternoon, Emily discovered Sophie sitting alone on the porch, crying quietly. "What happened?" The little girl quickly wiped her face. "Nothing." Emily sat beside her. After a long silence, Sophie whispered, "Kids at school say everyone leaves me." Emily felt something inside her collapse. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter." Yes, it did, because Emily knew exactly how those words felt. That night she packed her suitcase. Chicago was waiting. Her old life, her job, her apartment, freedom. But while zipping the suitcase closed, she noticed one of her father's letters resting on the bedside table. "Please don't punish Sophie for my mistakes." Emily sat motionless for nearly an hour. Then she unpacked everything. The following morning, Sophie entered the kitchen half asleep. "Are you going somewhere?" Emily looked at her carefully. Then she smiled. "No," Sophie blinked. "No? I think I'm staying." The child stared for one stunned second before launching herself into Emily's arms so hard they nearly fell backward. Emily held her tightly, and for the first time since her mother died, the emptiness inside her chest loosened slightly. Months later, spring arrived softly over the town. Flowers bloomed again near the porch. The bakery reopened under new ownership, and laughter slowly returned to the old Harrison house. One evening, Emily stood beside the lake watching Sophie chase fireflies through tall grass. The sunset painted the water gold. Claire approached quietly beside her. "He'd be proud of you." Emily looked toward the sky. For years she thought forgiveness meant forgetting pain. Now she understood differently. Forgiveness was choosing not to let pain become inheritance. Her father failed her, but his failure would not define Sophie's future. As darkness settled over the lake, Sophie ran back toward them, laughing breathlessly, tiny hands glowing with captured fireflies. Emily knelt and opened the jar carefully. Together they watched the lights rise into the night sky, free at last.